I thought I had lost everything, my wife, my will to live, my reason to even open the door in the morning. The world was quiet, cold, and unbearably empty. Until one snowy evening, she appeared. An injured deer, barely breathing, collapsed on my doorstep. I didn't know it then. But this fragile, silent creature was about to teach me how to feel again. She wasn't just wounded. She was a mirror of my own broken soul. And as I nursed her back to life, something unexpected happened. I began to heal too. This isn't just a story about saving a wild animal. It's about grief, unexpected love, and the kind of hope that shows up when you've stopped believing in miracles. The knock that wasn't a knock. It wasn't a knock. It was softer, almost like a whisper against the wood. But somehow it reached me louder than thunder. It was a cold December evening, the kind where silence blankets the world and even the trees seem to hold their breath. I was alone, curled up on my worn-out couch, wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. The TV murmured in the background, more for company than entertainment. It had been a year since I lost my wife, Sarah. Since then, my home has become more of a shelter than a sanctuary, quiet, still, and filled with memories I both cherished and feared. That's when I heard it. Not a knock, not a bang, just a soft thud, like something fragile had given up right outside my front door. I hesitated. The sound was so gentle I almost convinced myself it was the wind. But something, call it instinct or maybe something deeper, urged me to get up. I walked slowly to the door, expecting nothing more than perhaps a fallen branch or a stray cat. But when I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. There, collapsed on my snowy porch, was a deer. Not just any deer, a young one, maybe a year old. Its legs were trembling, blood smeared across one side of its coat. One of its back legs was twisted unnaturally, clearly broken. But what struck me most was its eyes. Those eyes didn't look wild. They didn't flinch in fear. They looked right into mine, soft, trusting, and full of pain. It was as if this creature had dragged itself through the snow just to reach me. As if it knew I would open the door, as if it chose me. I knelt slowly, not wanting to scare it. "Hey there," I whispered, unsure why I was speaking out loud, but feeling like silence would somehow hurt it more. "It's okay. You're safe now." The deer didn't move. It just watched me, breathing heavily, its body visibly trembling. Snow had clung to its fur, and tiny flakes were melting around its eyes. I saw something then, something I hadn't felt in so long. Need, vulnerability, and a silent plea for help. Without thinking, I gently placed my hand near its neck. It didn't flinch. Its body was cold, but it allowed my touch as if it had been waiting for it. I couldn't understand why this wild animal was trusting me, but maybe, in a strange way, we were both just broken beings looking for something warm in the cold. I couldn't leave it there. I couldn't look into those eyes and walk away. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I opened the door wide and whispered, "Come in." It didn't move on its own. I had to lift it. Its body was heavier than it looked, and warm blood stained my jacket as I carried it in. But I didn't care. For the first time in a year, my heart was beating for something other than grief. Laid it gently near the fireplace, wrapped it in an old blanket, and watched as it slowly closed its eyes, not in fear, but in peace. And in that moment, something inside me stirred. I didn't know it yet, but that broken deer had just begun to heal something far deeper in me. Eyes full of pain, heart full of trust. There are eyes that see, and then there are eyes that speak. Hers didn't just look at me, they told me a story I wasn't ready for. I spent that first night beside her, sitting silently on the floor, with my back against the wall, the fire crackling gently beside us. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. Something about the presence of that injured deer lying on my rug, so fragile yet somehow dignified, felt sacred, as if the world had paused just long enough for two broken souls to find each other in the stillness. She didn't move much, except to breathe in shallow, careful gasps, The twisted leg lay curled awkwardly, and I could tell the pain must have been excruciating. But she didn't cry, she didn't struggle, she just trusted me. That trust, without words, without reason, was the part that undid me the most. Around midnight, I found myself whispering stories to her. About Sarah, about how we used to feed the deer together from the backyard during winters, just like this one. How Sarah would leave little piles of apples out and smile when they disappeared. How the house had gone silent when she did. And how I'd stopped talking to anyone, including myself, since the day I scattered her ashes near the stream. She loved, but somehow I was talking now. I don't know if she understood me, but those eyes never looked away. They shimmered in the firelight like dark amber glass, and every now and then they blinked slowly, like she was listening, like she was telling me, "I'm here, I hear you." The next morning, I called a local vet I trusted. I left out the part about how I'd brought a wild deer into my living room, afraid they'd tell me to release her, or worse, put her down. Instead, I said, I found an injured animal near my property and asked what I could do. They walked me through how to stabilize her, how to splint the leg with gauze and wood, how to help her eat soft fruits like mashed bananas or apples. It wasn't perfect care, but it was something. When I brought over the first mashed apple mixture, I crouched down beside her and held the bowl close. "You hungry, girl?" I murmured, keeping my voice soft, calm. She tilted her head slightly. Then after a few long moments, she leaned forward and licked at the food, slowly but steadily. I laughed. It was quiet, almost startled, like I had forgotten what laughter even felt like on my lips. I hadn't laughed since Sarah died. Not once. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" I said, smiling for the first time in a year. That day marked a shift. Not just in her healing, but in mine. The deer, whom I'd now started calling Hope, began eating more, drinking water from a bowl I placed beside her, and resting easier. She let me touch her without flinching. Her eyes never lost that softness, but more than anything, she brought back a piece of something I thought I'd buried with Sarah. Connection, compassion, and a quiet kind of companionship that asked for nothing but presence. Hope had trusted me without question. And somehow, in doing so, she taught me how to trust myself again. A stranger in my home, a warmth in my soul. Some strangers knock on your door and ask for shelter. Others collapse into your life uninvited, and somehow make it whole again. The days that followed passed in a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. I would wake up just after sunrise, often before the alarm, my feet drawn to the room where Hope lay curled beside the fireplace. She had claimed that little corner as her own, and in a strange way it felt like she'd always belonged there. Her leg was still badly injured, wrapped in the makeshift splint. I carefully checked every day, but she was stronger now, more alert, more alive, and I was changing too, not in grand, visible ways, but in quiet, almost invisible cracks of light breaking through the grief. I started humming again, little tunes I used to whistle when Sarah cooked or when we walked through the forest trails hand in hand. I began opening windows to let the morning sun pour in. I started cooking real food instead of heating up canned soup. For the first time in so long, I was living with someone again, even if she couldn't speak. But she didn't need to. Hope had a language of her own. When I sat beside her in the evenings, she would lift her head and nuzzle her nose toward my hand. Sometimes she would blink slowly, like a silent thank you. Other times she would simply lie there, still and calm, breathing in rhythm with me. There was no fear in her anymore, only trust. That simple, quiet trust filled my home with something it hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth. One afternoon, snow began to fall again. Thick, soft flakes danced outside, the window covering the world in silence. I stood there watching it, remembering how Sarah used to press her palm against the cold glass and whisper, "Isn't it magical how the world knows when to slow down?" I turned to Hope. She was watching me. "I used to hate the silence," I told her. After she passed, it was all I could hear, but with you here it's different. It's softer now, kinder. I didn't expect anything in return, but Hope did something she hadn't done before. She stood. Her legs were shaky, especially the injured one, but she rose, slow and determined. She took a few small, careful steps, and I immediately rushed to support her. But she didn't falter. She just looked at me as if to say, "I'm not broken, just healing." I knelt beside her, overcome with something I couldn't name. Gratitude. Or maybe even love. "You're incredible," I whispered, resting my forehead gently against hers. Her fur was warm, her breath soft against my skin. "You have no idea what you brought back into this house, into me." And in that quiet, snow-dusted moment, I realized something I hadn't dared believe since Sarah's death. This house wasn't empty anymore. Not because someone had filled it with noise or laughter, but because someone had filled it with meaning again. A gentle soul who asked for nothing, yet gave me everything. Hope wasn't just a deer, she was the warmth I never thought I'd feel again. The long winter of healing. Healing doesn't come all at once. It arrives slowly, in quiet moments, in deep breaths, in the silence shared between two souls who refuse to give up. Winter deepened. The snow piled high along the window ledges, and the wind outside howled like a wounded memory. But inside my little house, something different was happening. While the world outside froze over, something inside was thawing, both in hope and in me. Her recovery was slow. Some days she limped more than others. Some nights she lay still and shivered, and I would stay up just to be near her, placing warm towels around her body and whispering gently into the dark. I learned to read the signs in her posture, when she was hurting, when she was tired, when she was afraid. She never cried out, never resisted. She simply endured. And I began to realize we weren't just healing separately, we were healing together. I started journaling again. I hadn't written a single word since Sarah died, but now, each night, after Hope had fallen asleep, I'd light a small candle at the desk and write. I wrote about the day Hope arrived, about the way her eyes stopped my breath, about how her trust humbled me. But soon, I wasn't writing about her anymore. I was writing about myself, about the hollow space Sarah left behind, about the guilt I'd carried for moving on with my life, about how loneliness had become a second skin I never thought I'd shed, and yet I was shedding it. Hope brought routine back into my life, feeding times, care schedules, checking the splint, and warming her corner. And in those simple daily rituals, I found purpose again. A reason to get up. A reason to move. A reason to feel. Sometimes when I would sit by the fire reading a book or just staring into the flames, Hope would limp closer and rest her head on my knee. I would stroke her fur slowly, gently. There were no words in those moments. But somehow, they said, more than 1,000 conversations could. I wasn't sure what would happen when spring came. Would she leave? Would she return to the forest? Would the bond we shared survive her freedom? The thought scared me more than I wanted to admit. I kept telling myself, this is temporary, you're just helping her until she's strong enough to go. But I knew the truth deep down. She wasn't just healing in my home, she had become my home. Every limp she took across the wooden floor echoed with courage. Every glance she gave me reminded me that life wasn't over just because something beautiful had ended. It was still here, in new forms, quieter perhaps, but no less powerful. The long winter outside pressed on. But in the warmth of our small sanctuary, the ice within me had already begun to melt. We were two broken creatures, but in our brokenness we found something neither of us expected: hope. When goodbye isn't the end. The hardest goodbyes don't happen in words. They happen in the quiet moments, when you realize something you love no longer needs to stay, and you have to let it go anyway. The snow began to melt. It started with the steady drip of icicles surrendering to the sun. Then came the patches of brown earth peeking through the white. Birds returned in hesitant flocks, chirping like tiny prophets of spring, and the air, once razor-sharp and bitter, began to feel softer against my skin. Hope was stronger now. Her leg, though still marked with scars, had regained most of its strength. She walked with a limp, but it didn't slow her down. In fact, each day she grew bolder, venturing further across the living room, pressing her nose curiously against windows, and once even following me out to the porch, as if she remembered what it meant to want the outside again. And that terrified me, because I knew what it meant. She was ready. The wildness in her, the thing that had been buried beneath pain and trust and quiet companionship, was waking up. Her ears twitched more often. Her gaze wandered to the trees beyond the glass. I saw it in the way she sniffed the wind when the door opened. The forest was calling her home. And I wasn't ready to let go. One morning, I opened the back door to let in fresh air while I swept the kitchen floor. I didn't expect her to follow me, but when I turned around, there she was, standing just beyond the threshold, her hooves crunching gently on the wet earth. She didn't run. She just stood there, staring out into the open, the wind playing with the tufts of fur around her neck. I walked over slowly and knelt beside her. "You feel it too, don't you?" I whispered. "It's time." Her ear twitched. She looked at me. Not with sorrow, not with hesitation, but with something almost grateful. I ran my hand down her side, memorizing the softness, the warmth. My heart was aching, a deep, twisting ache that felt both unbearable and sacred. "You don't have to stay," I said. My voice cracked. "You never did. You were never mine to keep." For a while, she didn't move. Then slowly, she stepped forward, just a few feet, into the grass, into the light. And then she stopped. She turned her head back and looked at me one last time. Her eyes, those same eyes that had once pleaded for help on a snowy doorstep, now shone with strength, with peace, with goodbye. She didn't need me anymore. But in that final look, I understood something I hadn't known until then. I would never be alone again. Because love, real love, leaves footprints that no snow can cover. And though she walked back into the forest that day, hope had already made a home inside me. Letting go wasn't losing. It was honoring the gift she gave me. A gift I never expected. A second chance at living. The deer who taught me to live again. Some souls come into your life like falling stars, brief, beautiful, and unforgettable. But some, like hope, don't just light up your sky, they change your whole world. The days after she left felt both empty and full. I would still wake up early out of habit, expecting to hear the soft shuffle of hooves on the wooden floor. My hand would reach for the bowl of mashed apples I no longer needed to prepare. The silence in the house returned, but it wasn't the same kind of silence that once haunted me. This silence was gentle. It carried echoes of the warmth we had shared. Soft breaths by the fire, the rustle of fur on the rug, the slow rhythm of healing hearts. It was no longer the silence of grief. It was the silence of gratitude, and I carried her with me. Every time I stepped outside, I looked toward the trees, half hoping to catch a glimpse of her slender shape between the trunks. Most days, I didn't. But sometimes, just as the sun dipped behind the horizon, I thought I saw her, watching from a distance. Proud, free, whole. I started walking the forest trails again, trails I once couldn't bear to face after Sarah passed. I talked to the wind, to the trees, and to the invisible presence I felt beside me. Not because I was lonely, but because I was alive, truly alive. One afternoon, I found myself back at the stream where I had spread Sarah's ashes. The water sparkled like it remembered her laughter. I knelt by the edge, dipped my fingers in the cold, clear flow, and closed my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, "for sending her to me." Maybe it was foolish to think Sarah had anything to do with it. Maybe it was all just chance. A broken deer stumbling onto the porch of a broken man. But deep in my soul, I knew better. The timing, the way she looked at me, the way she stayed, it all felt too perfectly woven to be coincidence. Hope had walked into my life, carrying more than pain. She brought presence, purpose, a reminder that love doesn't end, it transforms. That healing isn't a finish line, it's a choice you make every day, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Months passed. Then one morning, deep into spring, I was watering the garden I had finally started planting again. I heard a soft rustle near the tree line. And there she was. Hope stood tall at the forest's edge, stronger than ever, her coat gleaming in the golden light. but she wasn't.
Alone. Beside her, wobbly on fresh legs, stood a tiny fawn, my heart caught in my chest. He looked at me only for a moment, but it was enough.
In her eyes, I saw the same calm trust, the same quiet strength she had once found in me. She turned, nudged her baby gently, and disappeared into the woods. And I smiled through the tears that spilled freely down my cheeks. She had healed. She
had lived. And now she was giving life. Hope had come to me as a fragile creature on the brink of death. She left as a mother, a guide, and a symbol of everything I never knew I needed. She didn't just change my life. She gave it back to me.